Hi, Alexandra. Thank you so much for that. It's really, really interesting and helpful. We'll just wait for other speakers to join us if that's okay. Hi, Joe.
Do you want us to appear, Isla? Yeah?
Yes, definitely. You're switching Jasmine. Perfect. So we're going to finish the day with a 30-minute session that just brings back everyone who was able to stay to discuss some of the key strands and questions that we might have had through the day that we can do together. So please ask some questions in the Q&A channel. It's a really amazing opportunity to ask these people who are thinking around the subject in lots of different ways and have lots of different experiences, and to kind of help us navigate how these collections can be relevant in this context. And so we're welcoming Joe Hatton, Keeper of Natural History at the Horniman Museum and Gardens, Jasmine Mars-Long, who's an ethical taxidermist, Alexandra Alberda, who is Curator of Indigenous Perspectives at Manchester Museum, and Julian Carter, who is Principal Conservator for Natural Sciences at National Museum Wales. So thank you so much for joining us today. So I think people are conjuring up their questions. So I might start if that's okay. So we focused today broadly on sort of engaging people, maybe museum visitors, with environmental breakdown through natural science collections. And all our talks have had different ways of using the collection, perhaps from collaborations with contemporary artists, interventions, inspiring action, reconsidering meaning of taxidermy or knowledge, different knowledges, and pluralizing the way we think about knowledge and multicultural and multi-species perspectives. So I wanted, from your really varied perspective and expertise, what you think are the most sort of unique or important ways that natural history displays can help visitors make a difference or make sense of environmental breakdown. Anyone wants to kick us off? And that's in the broadest sense, how can these collections perhaps make a difference when we're thinking about displays and engaging with visitors? Alexandra.
Hi, I think I sat a lot and thought about that, and I think as much, and you'll know, Isla, because we were at that panel together for the Museums Association, but what I took away from that is it's such a difficult thing to talk about. It is so overwhelming. So displays that can empower and show both stories of bigger change that maybe me or you couldn't action because we don't have the resources or not in certain parts of the world, but what can we action in our back door? What can we be a part of? That's also not a pay barrier. And so are there stories of, I'm thinking in Manchester, we have Leo Grindon, who was really famous the last turn of the century for teaching the working class how to garden, which got him kicked out of a lot of hoity-toity societies. But those stories, and how can we bring that in? So I think telling both big and small empowering stories so that when people leave, they feel inspired about what they can go do.
Yeah, and I think often in conversations you can work through that, can't you? And it sort of feels this big, yucky, horrible thing, and actually that's not a place to do much from, I suppose. And how about any of our other speakers? Do you have a perspective on that?
I don't think there's one way really. I think as today is represented, it's about using any opportunity you can in as many different ways you can to use the collections. You know, you can use the science side of it, you can use the creativity side of it, you can merge all those ideas, you can bring the stories that are behind it. Yeah, there isn't one way. I think we just got to be creative and continue to be creative and to work together as much as we can and share what we do, because it's quite remarkable as today's show, you know, there's all sorts going on. So I think just keep using your collections, you know, try and get them out there. It justifies them more and more. They're becoming more and more valuable. I think one of the saddest things that comes out of these conversations and these conferences, and, you know, there's another conference going on at the moment with AIC and the Joint Spinach Conference, and some of the stories coming out as well, is how much in our collections is endangered, extinct. We don't know much about it. And it's deeply saddening that, you know, these are becoming the last bastions of knowledge for these things. And it's going beyond that, isn't it? To say, like, going back to the story of the beaver, you know, the beavers coming back into the landscapes around here in Wales, for example. So it's also those stories of hope as well, and of bringing the environments back. Yeah. So not one way, just keep using them. That's my opinion.
And we're so pleased to be able to facilitate any of that, through this kind of shared practice platform like a conference. We really appreciate different ideas. Does anyone else, Joe or Jasmine, would you like to?
Yeah, you go next, Jasmine, and I'll go after.
I was just going to say as well, I think with you all having, these amazing objects that have become extinct, you've got this physical object, and I think that a lot of people don't realize that it's still actually the DNA of that animal, which doesn't exist on the earth anymore. And a lot of people would say that, we have amazing photography and things now, or, cameras, why is taxidermy even relevant? But just kind of bringing to the forefront the fact that it's actually a physical piece of data. It's actually the animal, and putting that on display, as heavy as that is, this animal it doesn't exist apart from in this form. And no matter how many illustrations or photographs of that, this is still part of that animal, is a really kind of heavy thing, and can be done in a really beautiful way. That's what I'd say.
I can't get, as a curator working with collections, it is, like you say, it can be very, very heavy. And the timescales as well, people often don't realize the timescales of these things are quite recent. People our visitors at the museum at least can consign it to the past very quickly. But actually here it's within the history of the museum because we've got stuff done on display.
Wow.
So that's really interesting, thank you. And Joe, how about you? Anything that springs to mind?
Yeah, I think Jasmine's hit on something there. I think actually we might have been more recently been a little bit afraid of pulling on that emotional kind of connection a little bit more. We've maybe, and I think maybe doing that, it doesn't do any harm. And I think some of the artistic interventions that a lot of us have been engaging with over the past few years have really enabled us to kind of explore that and be a little bit more playful. I think what we need to be doing a little bit more, and I've been guilty of this myself, is actually perhaps we've been a little bit fearful of jumping out of the box a little bit and doing these interventions where we put plastics and I know this is not necessarily something that nobody's ever done before. I know lots of curators in the 90s did this kind of set dressing and things, but actually putting plastics in displays in aquariums and our natural history galleries and things is quite unusual. And it's taken us all this time to sort of think, well, actually, why shouldn't we do things like this? Why shouldn't we, put our collections in space, in the context of what people are actually experiencing in real life when they go for a walk on the beach or in their local nature reserve or something? They're not just seeing nature in this beautiful, pristine state anymore. And, bringing that to people who don't necessarily engage with nature and using that as an opportunity to make people think a little bit more is, I think, definitely we should be doing more of it and not be so scared about kind of offending too many people around it all, really.
Sorry, I was just going to add to that, as a visitor to museums, often the taxidermy is used to represent where this animal's from, and it's lovely, and often visitor assistants are quite frightened of the discussion when a child says, is it dead? And the fact is you have things in your collection that are dead and extinct. I mean, that's insane. So I think it is like now is when you should be talking about the fact that these are so dead, and you've got that power.
But also this idea of that we shouldn't be activist as well. I think that kind of, and empowering people to say, you can do something, go out there, if you want to go out there and tweet and complain and write to your MP and all of this kind of stuff, or your local supermarket about the amount of plastic in it, go do it. Why are we sitting on the fence? We don't need to anymore.
Does anyone else want to respond to that? I was interested, just touching on, Jasmine, what you were saying about taxidermy, because I know you were talking about your ethical practice and practices of the past. And I often wonder if taxidermists of the past, how you see their ethics, like if we're trying to present these quite difficult, challenging objects, and their histories, which are of course all relevant in terms of thinking about ecology and environment and attitudes to nature. Do you have any insight in terms of historic taxidermists?
Yeah, I think that every natural history museum, in my opinion, should have a section which says, you know, these are craft objects, they were made by people, they were collected and hunted, and actually just be completely open about the fact that it's not nice, you know, and also the now, you know, the kind of colonization problems, everything that comes with a natural history, you know, collection, it should be on display. But for my own particular work, you know, it's not a dead animal, it's an art object. Like it wouldn't be there if someone hadn't sculpted it. And I think that's very much not on display in most natural history contexts, because the science and the education is kind of the forefront of what they want to do. But it always astounds me that, you know, we had a talk today about the art in collaboration with natural history. And for me, my aim before I die, hopefully, is that you literally can have a piece of taxidermy in an art gallery and that's enough. It doesn't have to have a conceptual artist. You know, I am an artist as well as a taxidermist, but it doesn't have to have this huge conceptual like line with it. It can be as beautiful as a painting or a piece of pottery, and maybe that object will then be part of, you know, the anthropology collection and not just natural sciences, which gets the least money. It doesn't make sense to me as someone that spends all of my time making something with my hands that it's seen, you know, only really displayed as, you know, this animal's from Australia, this is what it does, isn't it cool?
So interesting. Alexandra?
Yeah, I think a lot of that you just said really resonates with me as far as in our own museum, which I will say I'm very proud that we do have more on like the on taxidermy and how it's done, and kind of the trophy hunting that happened. But I feel the same about with Indigenous perspectives and bringing in a polycultural idea of science, is that then here's the ethnographic collections, then you walk over to the natural sciences, which is so, for me, it is so bizarre, because I walk through and say, but actually we're in the hall of our ancestors now. Now we have more information we can pull on from that idea. So I think of breaking down sounds amazing, of these also, what are these interventions between the natural science collections and the ethnographic, both in a way that we can show like taxidermy examples to show us how we start to break down those in that physical object, as well as the conceptual things and debates that you're getting at that are around that, with at what point does it become art object, at what point does it not, if there's a human hand in both. So I think that really, that's one, I just want to say, I think that speaks to these larger things that we need to break down, and possibly even as a way to get at a holistic approach to environmental breakdown as well.
Absolutely. Julian?
Yeah, I'd like to follow that actually, because Yasmin raises good points there, and working technically for a national museum, but a multidisciplinary one. And I think some of these things are much better for the smaller museums that are less sort of got the bureaucratic systems to work through. It's been quite a struggle for us to sort of bring all the different disciplines together. They've been working in silos for many years, and to get that curatorial thinking to cross over, it has been very tough. It's changing quite drastically, which I'm glad to say, especially when, you know, an institution like mine, which has got, you know, impressionist art and all sorts of things within spitting distance of each other. But some of the most successful things we've definitely done in recent years are with partnership galleries like the Oriel Park one in Pembrokeshire, which is a beautiful space where we just had high-end, high-quality artwork, natural science, archaeology. The last one we did, Stones and Bones, was included a lot of the archaeology of the area, and also had a contemporary projection in the background from an artist, Sean Harris, who's a great guy to work with. And it all came together, and it was just brilliant, and the impact it had was fantastic. And again, it just goes, just share it, bring all this stuff together. Together, it has a massive impact. And I think the museum world itself has got to break down a lot of the barriers within its own way of working.
It's really
to make that work more effectively. It's annoying actually. I'm having a little bit of a rant here now. It's just like, I don't know why it's so difficult not to work together more.
You're another friend.
Right, I'm going to shut up now. I could get into
No, I
trouble.
think, it's really interesting, isn't it? And we have to really challenge ourselves as a wider museum community. And although it's great to collaborate with external partners, like there's a big challenge about the internal silos, like Alexandra said, and, you know, challenging where we put the box of this thing, whereas actually it's not just that, is it? It's many, many other things. And in a way, it's not telling the truth if we're saying here it is as this specific thing. And that's where really exciting potential lies. And I wonder how we kind of, and there's lots of, it's about kind of collaborations like this and discussions like this, challenging our own thinking, because it's really hard to see it, isn't it? If you've been educated in that knowledge structure, like you can be, you know, just, yeah, you know what I'm saying. Was there anything else you bring on that? Anyone who's had some successes with, or kind of recent insights into different ways of doing things?
I think we've just started to touch the surface of it here at the Horniman. In, you know, our anthropology, you know, you obviously know our anthropologists really well, Alexandra, I'm sure, and they we recently redeveloped the world, what we call the World Gallery, and we certainly worked more, you know, to some degree in a collaborative way with our anthropologists on that, incorporating natural history, not just as, you know, I think before we all, you know, I think you enter in this space of, you know, the natural history is like set dressing, you know, so, oh, you know, this animal represents this culture, so let's just borrow something from natural history that, you know, is, yeah, beaver, let's just put a beaver, you know, and I'm not sure we entirely still, you know, got that right. I think I still kind of feel like, yeah, we incorporated some natural history into that new gallery. I'm not entirely sure how much beyond set dressing it became, but at least it's there. And at least it shows people these interconnections. And I think, you know, we're definitely talking to each other a lot more now. And it's something that we hope to develop for the Nature and Love Project more as well, this interdisciplinarity institutionally. And then, and, you know, to some degree, I think it is about, you know, people, especially people who are more academic, perhaps in their focus, you know, do just, you know, they want to do their thing often and they don't make time for the collaborating. And I think sometimes it's as simple as that. And you just have to make the time and talk to each other and spend time like in the tea room together. And, you know, that kind of thing, you know, not just stay in your office all day in separate parts of the museum, which I'm sure we've all experienced. But the other thing I just wanted to really briefly touch upon, and you know, I'd be so interested in finding out a little bit more of people, you know, outside of this panel's experiences, is the impact side and how people have, you know, I'd be so interested to hear about the evaluation you did on your project, Jules, and the impact and the different, you know, because that's what I would really like to know more about. What happens once people leave the museum? Mm-hmm. Do they start recycling more? Do they start changing their behaviours? And it's a really, really difficult challenge. Yeah. Let's have a conversation with our learning team around it. But I would be so interested to find out whether we are making a difference doing all this stuff.
And what do you have in your mind when you're thinking about making a difference to people?
I think it's about you know, hoping that, you know, behavioural change will be happening, that people maybe will look at their consumption and their relationship with the environment, that they will spend more time outdoors, that people from more diverse backgrounds will do that, you know, all of those environmental things that we would love people to do to preserve nature and wildlife, and, you know, put less plastic in the ocean and all of these different things, that it's actually happening, you know, that they might change the tariff, you know, themselves, you know, to a green electricity tariff or whatever it might be. We don't know whether people are doing any of that once they've been to the museum often.
Yeah, it is challenging.
We're trying so hard to, you know, engage people with it, but we don't know whether they're acting on it.
Do you get it? Because I feel like when we've done it successfully, we do get feedback. People come and tell you. So sometimes there's the thing of like, we're not hearing back, but also it's a journey. So you might be just a part on someone's journey, and you know, you could start them off, you could be the like the final kind of like, and again, it's where that what that journey is, like what we're actually trying to achieve as well.
But I think that's what often people, you know, that's what I get to. It's like, oh, it's a passive, you know, it's a passive, you know, what all we can do is really communicate, and it's a passive thing. And, you know, I'm just kind of like, I just, yeah, you know, obviously we saw it as, I can't remember who said yesterday with it was James, wasn't it, with the David Attenborough example, you know, that we saw that visible change. But yeah,
Alexandra.
Yeah, and I think, Joe, that comes back to when you brought up activism, but then we went in a different direction. But I think bringing that into there is, I think we need to have different community-based activist models, and thinking about our exhibitions or education or these other kind of public engagement events that, like Jules was saying, that kind of happen in silos, and then it's like later we're like, oh yeah, we could have connected on that, but actually we need to refocus and work across these silos for these expanded programs. So it's not you did this museum thing in the museum or a one-off event we had outside, but it's a part of a strategic expanded program, so that you don't have to be the one only responsible for stepping out into nature and doing these things, or so what are the opportunities of taking that kind of learning and staying with them in different contexts. So one other project we're looking at doing is an Indigenous gardening with different local schools and little Mancunian gardeners, and sticking with them for a year, but being in their context. And that's when like things like the Blackberry thing will go out, and these will be family events, but thinking as these interconnected activity that we provide supplies for people to pick up whenever, but sticking around and trying to, as much as we can, kind of think of that when we're applying for funds for any projects, so that it might go out there and it might be they're the ones in control, and thinking in those more expanded terms, which will of course first take breaking down those silos to see what all the other departments are working on. But I think that's a part of it in that activist model.
That's really interesting, because we kind of came around to some quite grassroots models yesterday as well, when we were talking about this kind of imbalance between sort of national organizations and scientific research and the like many smaller institutions. That equitable approach of like, here it is, this is what you can do, and we'll stay and we'll have this relationship and we'll learn from you as well. Jules, because I know your project was very kind of activism focused and you worked very closely, you did build that relationship with your young people. I don't know if you have any insight into the kind of difference it made. And
yeah, you've got to remember that side of it was run by Sarah, really, one of our learning team, and the rest of it. And it's built on the whole back of a whole agendas that we've got now, and working under a social democratic framework and stuff like that. So there's all sorts of going up, you know, with Black Lives Matters and all sorts of things. And, you know, a lot of positive and really interesting stuff going on. So it's a bit difficult to keep a whole handle on it. But that was one of the pilot projects for a lot of these. There was a few of them, and it just introduced a really good way of working. So I think what I take from that, it's team working again. It's being prepared to work together and to facilitate. You know, I initiated the idea. The idea got taken up by others, and I just helped support it by sort of being the donkey and sorting things out and moving things around and operating scissor lifts, because that's been the theme today as well. But where I was going is, you know, it's also going back. I think we need to be almost brave as a conservator. I think we always need to be braver in the way we use the collections and where we take them as well. I think this conversation just reminded me, and I think Bethany might be here somewhere and the rest of it. There are a few of us when we had the Spinach Conference in Cardiff in 2014, and we stuck a couple of cases in the foyer at the Wales Millennium Centre, which had specimens collected by Darwin, Wallace, Blaschke glass models, the first described bit of dinosaur, all sorts of things, which were the real things, stuck in the foyer of a big art centre. And a lot of people were going, what's that doing here? That shouldn't be here. That should be in a museum. And we're going, no, it should be here. It's safe. It's looked after. And it had huge impact because, you know, 25,000 people went through the place to see Warhols that week or whatever. So I think it's been prepared. You know, it's all balances, looking after our collections and risks and the rest of it. But it's been prepared to work together to take the collections in unexpected ways. And that will also add to those impacts and getting those messages that we're trying to get across. I think it's a good thing to do.
Thank you. Jasmine, did you have any reflections on that? I know you've worked with lots of different museums, and have you seen anything you wanted to add?
I guess the only, I mean, my mind's just gone blank because you've just asked me. I guess like the one thing I'd say where you're kind of bridging that gap is maybe, you know, the Horniman Museum with its kind of I don't know what you call that temporary gallery space, Joe, but the, you know, the art space where I've had the show, and Claire's had a show, and Polly Morgan's had a show, and I guess you're walking through into the Natural History Gallery, but your first vision is this interaction with the natural history. So it's art, and it bridges some gap. And I think that Claire's work, specifically with the plastics coming out of the taxidermy, you know, obviously it's amazing, but it must have created some kind of shock factor or, you know, strange reaction to the visitors, because it's, you know, it's essentially taxidermy, which people are used to seeing in that context, but in a weird, you know, in a weird way. I mean, what was the reaction to that exhibition? Was there like a kind of environmental reaction?
Very definitely. Yeah, it draws people. Yeah, it draws people in. I listened to. We didn't evaluate that one, but I did do an evaluation on the Polly Morgan one, actually, on using an Arts Council framework. I forgot what the name of it was. Actually what people were discussing and what people were thinking about and what it brought to the fore in terms of their you know, thinking about environment was a lot deeper than I expected, actually. So that was really good. And people do, people have a response that is quite different to the response that they have just walking into the familiar. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think when I had the exhibition there, having the video, I mean, this goes back to talking about what a taxidermy object is again, but you know, the video where you could see how the object was made had a really good reaction with visitors, didn't it? And I think the minute you put even a very small intervention into a normal gallery space, I think it can make a huge impact, because it's just different, isn't it?
Yeah, that was one of the best. I think actually that was probably one of the best and most responded to pieces we've had actually in the gallery. You know, everything. I watched 3-year-olds just like this, kind of standing in front of it, just absolutely, you know, enthralled watching it, from 2-3-year-olds to, you know, pensioners, really, having really interesting discussions about, oh, I didn't know it was like that. I didn't have a clue she did that, you know. Yeah, it's just so brilliant. Yeah,
I guess for children it's like unveiling a magic trick, because the one thing they want to know is like, is it dead? You know, they think they're not, or they are. So it's like showing how the magic's done.
Yeah.
Which I don't think, you know, ruins I think it enhances their experience. And maybe then from that you can talk about, why do animals die? Oh, do human, you know, modern ethical taxidermists, I only use things that have been hit by cars or flown into windows or dragged in by cats, all things put in place, you know, they've all died because of people, if by accident, you know, and then you can go on to talk about that with your collections, maybe, all from like showing that they're not just an animal.
Yeah, it's just reminded me, actually, we had all those conversations we had about the amount of gore we showed in that film as well, kind of how much, you know, so there was quite a bit of institutional, particularly in our learning team, sort of concern around visitor response to seeing kind of, blood and guts, really, and how much of that we should take. So we did end up taking quite a bit out, didn't we? And we ended up with lots of things of you just stirring solutions instead. But and our front of house team as well, there was concern around, not necessarily with the author, but the first time we did it with Polly Morgan's work, there was quite a lot of concern around, you know, this is a little bit much, you know, some of our family visitors or some certain visitors just are going to find this too difficult to deal with. But actually that really didn't happen at all. People were just fascinated in the main by it. Which I think ended up reassuring everybody that maybe we were being too cautious.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, people that visit museums, of course, you know, they like to have a bit of history, but they want to have, you know, inherently all humans are a bit selfish, so they want to see themselves in that gallery. What's happening now? How am I relating to this exhibition? Does that make sense? Rather than just saying, oh, look, there was that guy that used to make those things way before I was born. You know, this is a problem now. You know, these objects are here, and just kind of using them powerfully and not being frightened, because they are dead animals. They're amazing, and they talk hugely about this issue. So use them without fear, because if you go to a museum and just have a mild experience, do you think you're doing a good job? I mean, not to be mean to everyone, but you know, do you think you're doing a good job? If you just go and you have a cup of tea and you have a lovely time, what does that educate in any way?
At the time of, we're talking about environmental breakdown. That's quite a severe term, isn't it? Or crisis, or the stats all for what is it that's happening there? Amazing. We've actually come to the end of the conference. I'm really gutted because we could carry on talking about this all day. There were a couple of comments in the chat around institutional buy-in, and obviously I think you guys, many of you represent really amazing institutions who seem very forward-looking and have this kind of, Joe, you talked about your strategic, and Jules and Alexandra, you've both mentioned that, sort of having those institutions behind you, which not everyone experiences, but actually it makes it all the more important for you guys to be here sharing with us, sharing in these platforms in the museum sector as well, when you do get those. And someone else was talking about silos. Can we have some silo polish? And I guess it's partly doing it for ourselves, isn't it? Like we're all part of the silo, and we can relatively easily, like you say, through tea, coffee, whatever, break those down. So there's huge amounts of potential just within our community even. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, and really appreciate those thoughts. There's no kind of really clear answer, but actually I feel like there are lots of positive suggestions that people can hopefully take away with them, and really look forward to following your work as well. So thank you to everyone for attending the conference. A final thanks to all the contributors and the attendees and all the organisers. It's been amazing to be able to come together despite the pandemic, to kind of have this opportunity to share and learn from each other, have a good chat, have some amazing glimpses into the natural science collections around the world. I hope you found it useful. Thank you very much to everyone who's filled in an evaluation form. I think it's being emailed around as well. It really helps us make sure the program's as good as it can be. Obviously, a lot of this digital virtual conferencing is new to us. And please do keep an eye out for the virtual content that will be shared as soon as we can. So take care, keep in touch, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.